Now, like with all pods, the SCALEAUTO pod requires a bit of work. So I like to get a drill bit and go over the holes and deburr them, just so there's nothing there that can grab. I like to go along around the pod with a blade and scrape and get any slight little burrs that are on there off. You may also need to take a little bit off of the pod on this corner and even on these corners, just to get a little bit more float in there, because it's quite a tight fit into the chassis. So that's another thing you can look at. Also, I get rid of the plastic pinion and I put a Slotting Plus 13 pinion on there. These are a great pinion, and on my Porsche the plastic one split and within the first 5 minutes and was no good. So get rid of that plastic pinion and you'll have a better car. With the pod, I've freed up the motor inside it a bit so it's not so tight, and as you can see, it's got a little bit of movement there. So when I put the screws in, I won't put them in and do them up tight. I'll do them just in there to locate the holes and have them in there nice, and just for that reason, so that when I glue it, it'll sit in the spot where I want. But there's quite a bit of movement there which will affect your gear mesh too, so you need to make sure you get that right. And I haven't even sanded any of that. That's how it came standard. So just be very careful of that. With any car that I get, I always find the axles are extremely important in terms of their alignment. So what I do is I get some sandpaper. This is some 1500 wet and dry. And I'll give it a really good sand and get any surface crap that's on there or any burrs or anything to disappear, and I'll do that quite a bit with a few different grades and really polish my axle up, because as this axle is going to be spinning in these bearings, I want the least amount of resistance I can possibly get. And if this axle doesn't drop straight through those bearings when I turn it on its side, like I'll show you shortly, then it's not aligned well, and that's going to cost you power. Here is an example of an axle that is not aligned. If you tilt it up like this, your axle, if aligned correctly, should just fall through and fall in and out. But as you can see, I've got to push that one, so that's not aligned. So you need to get that correct, otherwise you're just costing yourself power. Sometimes with these pods, they can have a tight spot where the bearing is. So you may need to get an axle, put it in here, and just work it around a little bit, so it's not binding and causing any pressure on that bearing that you don't want to cause the misalignment. So that's another little thing you can look at. But once we get that sorted, let's try and get this so it slides straight through and has nothing to grab to give us the maximum power we can. So now I've correctly aligned it, and as you'll see, it moves freely. So that is extremely important, otherwise you're just costing yourself revs and slowing your car down. So make sure your axle falls through the bearings in any car. Thankfully with the Cadillac, it looks like the pod and the chassis holes line up. On the Porsche, these don't line up, and you need to file out the holes on the chassis to get the pod to float, otherwise it just binds up. So you need to be very careful of that with the Porsche, but it looks like they fixed it with the Cadillac. Here you can see I've taken the little bits off the edge of the pod just to give it a little bit more float. And here you can see the front end where I've tapered my front tyres, and I've stuck, I think it might be a 4mm spacer in here to widen the front, as well as the wider axle to get the front end out as wide as I can possibly go. So now I'll start putting it together.